Hello! 大家好. Today I'm going to talk to you about the most important part of Chinese, which is C-dramas, and how I study using C-dramas. I'm just going to preface this by saying this is not my main way of studying Chinese, but when I just want to have fun with it, when I want to just enjoy Chinese and learn from native content that, you know, real Chinese people would be watching as well, then this is how I study when watching Chinese C-dramas. Chinese dramas. C-dramas. Yes, those. If you're new here, my name is Danai, welcome, and we're going to be going through where to watch C-dramas, learning mode, and extensions that are really useful to use when watching C-dramas. We're also going to be talking about how I take my notes, and also which dramas I like. I'm going to give you guys some recommendations from different genres and explain why I think they're good and bad for studying Chinese. But wait, 等一下. You may be wondering, if you know me at all, why are you posting semi-regularly? And the answer is, this month I'm collabing with my friends Natalia and Chloe to bring you a series of videos about study tips and resources that we like to use for Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. So if you're interested in Korean, please go over and check my friend Natalia's channel.
Hi, my name is Natalia. I've been learning Korean for a few years now, and today I'm going to share how I study Korean with BTS songs. If you're interested in that type of content, come see me on my channel. If not, that's cool. Maybe I'll see you some other time.
And if you're interested in Japanese, then Chloe has this for you this week.
Hey everyone, my name is Chloe, also known as Triple Monthly Studies. My main focus at the moment is Japanese, and in this week's video I'm going to be talking about learning Japanese through manga. So if that's your thing, come say hi.
Okay, now you can start. Where to watch C-dramas? So, as with social media, most Chinese dramas are actually found on separate platforms and websites than you would normally find Western shows. So the three main platforms that I use to watch C-dramas are Netflix, obviously, but also Viki and Ichi? I don't actually know how to say that. Please comment and tell me, because I've never known how to say that. But actually, if I'm trying to learn Chinese through watching C-dramas, I'm not going to use Ichi. I'm going to just use Viki and Netflix. That's because Netflix and Viki both have really good learning modes. So what is a learning mode? It's actually not specific to Chinese, but this is obviously the language that I'm learning, so this is how I use it for Chinese. This is going to be way easier if I just show you guys. Okay, let's start with LLN, which stands for Learning Languages with Netflix. It's basically just an extension to Google Chrome, which you can find if you go to Tools and Extensions. And then in the web store, you just need to type in Languages with Netflix. And you'll find it right here, Language Learning with Netflix. I've already added it, and it just looks like this. Then once you go into Netflix, and yes, I've got an Asian profile and an English profile, because then it just keeps them nice and separate and gives me good recommendations for both instead of mixing them up. Okay, so now we're in my Asian shows profile. Let's start watching, for example, Girl from Nowhere, which I'm really keen to watch actually. I think it's Thai. You can use this extension with literally any language or show. So all you want to do now is to set the subtitles on Netflix as you normally would, but make sure that they're always in Chinese or whatever language you want to learn. And then you press the LLN button and go into settings, and then you can choose a translation language. So I would choose English. And then it basically means that you can have two subtitles in two different languages. Super useful. The other thing that's so good about LLN, and why it's so important to have the Chinese at the top as your main subtitle language instead of at the bottom, is because there's a second sort of feature to LLN, which I'll show you now. Basically, say you're playing the show and they say a sentence that you really want to know. And these documents that I prepared. Okay, cool, that's a useful sentence. You can actually select the words along the subtitles, and it will bring up a translation and a pronunciation for it, as well as examples of how these words are used. So this is actually crucial to how I learn Chinese through C-dramas. They also have this AP feature in the corner, which if you turn it on, automatically pauses the show at the end of every sentence that everyone says, so you can review that sentence. I mean, I just usually let it play as normal and pause whenever there's a sentence that I personally want to watch, but if you're super keen, then you can do that. Okay, let's skip over onto Viki now. If you're not familiar with Rakuten Viki, it's basically a platform for all Asian shows. You can actually explore shows by country over here. Okay, so let's pick a show, Go Squid. I started watching that a while back. Okay, so if we just pause it here and we go into the settings, you can actually turn on learn mode here. And there's actually a little tab which says, what is this? Which basically does my job for me right now. Learn mode is really similar to LLN on Netflix, except that it's already built into Viki. You don't have to add an extension. And basically all it does is allow you to see the Chinese subtitles above the English, again, as with LLN. And if you click on the Chinese subtitles, you can actually open up a little card which has the pinyin, the audio for the Chinese subtitles, and, you know, the English meaning. This is a bad example because it has a completely different subtitle in English for some reason. I guess it's not updated. There you go. So both LLN and Viki learning mode actually really tie in the toggle feature, the fast forward and the reverse features, to the subtitles rather than just the general time code of the video, which super important if you're trying to learn a language. Okay, now let's talk about how I take my notes. So what I'll normally do is just pause when there's a sentence that comes up that I think sounds particularly colloquial or, you know, frequently used, something that's super useful to me. I'll write the characters next to the pinyin, next to the definition, and then underneath I'll try to write an example sentence, which is usually just the sentence that they have used in the show, so that I know how they use it in real life. With C-dramas, I really like to try and just focus on sentences and vocabulary that I wouldn't really normally pick up in my HSK books, for example, like to scan a WeChat QR code. Like, that has never come up in my HSK books. Actually, the word scan, sao, is a HSK 6 word, but you learn the word for fax at HSK 4. Like, that's more useful to me right now. So yeah, those are the kinds of words that I look out for. So, you know, more modern words, basically. Words that are to do with technology or phones or just day-to-day communications. And then what do I do with my notes, you ask? Nothing. Like, I think this is where I stumble. You know, I'm giving you guys my methods and what I do and trying to share resources and stuff, but honestly, I'm still learning myself. I'm not perfect at all. But for me, note-taking during C-dramas is more to just pull out the fundamental words and sentences that I think would be really useful to know. I just don't know how to kind of input them into my brain after I have selected them. So if you guys have advice, please comment below and tell me, because I definitely need it. Which is why we're gonna move swiftly on to C-dramas and recommendations. Okay, I'm just gonna run through a few C-dramas that I personally really liked and talk a bit about why I thought they were good or bad for Chinese learning. You will find that romance, and high school romance especially, is a huge category in not just Chinese but Asian dramas in general. There are so many of them. So actually my favorite two were A Little Thing Called First Love and A Love So Beautiful. You can find both of those on Netflix. The reason I really enjoyed these was because I genuinely found these more funny than a lot of romance high school dramas. You know, a lot of them tend to be more dramatic, but these two had a lot of really funny moments that I just genuinely enjoyed. Also, Shenyue in A Love So Beautiful, you have to watch at least one show with her. She's such a staple in Chinese C-dramas. Romance is actually not my favorite by any means. I find it a bit cheesy in Chinese dramas. But the reason I like to use romantic shows for learning Chinese is because the language is actually the most useful for me to learn from. So for example, the vocabulary that they're using, the grammar structures, the things that they're talking about are generally modern day, day-to-day conversations that you would normally also have if you went to China. Also, their Chinese tends to be a bit more clearer than other shows that I've watched. So as a Chinese learner who's, you know, not that advanced, that's a big thumbs up. Historical / mystery, because I've not gone for pure historical shows. One of my favorite shows at the moment / ever is The Longest Day in Chang'an. Now this is class. The production value is so high. It looks like a movie. It's just so cool. The story is really exciting. I say it's historical because it's actually based off a novel, and the characters in that novel are actually real historical figures that existed. It's almost Game of Thrones like. It's really intense, really well produced. They poured money into that show. But as a language learner, it's useless. Like, the vocabulary that they use is just stuff that I would never say in real life, like the sun has risen to its peak, and then they go into a whole proverb. But what I will say is useful is that because it's so good, I watched tons of it, and just immersing myself in a Chinese show for like any length of period really actually improves my Chinese listening and my ability to speak Chinese. And last but not least, the random category, because I don't know where to put this show. It's such a bizarre, out there show. It's called Tiansun Mystic, and I think the Chinese title is Heshen, so river god. This is a mystery slash fantasy slash historical. It's so weird, but it is, again, amazingly produced. It gets weirder and weirder as it goes along though, so I eventually stopped watching it, but it is really, really good, so I would definitely highly recommend it. It also has Li Xiang. You can't go wrong. We are so blessed. Okay, so that is pretty much everything that I've got for you guys. If you have any recommendations for C-dramas, if you have your own study methods for learning with C-dramas, K-dramas, J-dramas, whatever you watch, please put them down in the comments because I also want to learn from you guys. If you have any recommendations for how I can better take notes or what I should do with my notes after my C-dramas, also please let me know. Also be sure to check out Natalia and Chloe's videos. They have so many good tips. Next week we're taking a bit of a break, but in 2 weeks we're coming back with 2 more videos, so I'll see you then. Bye guys!